Here's a bit of a longer piece from the Wall Street Journal. Something I'm kind of shocked to see in the Wall Street Journal, especially this soon, but it shows you that I think the pendulum is swinging back. I think pendulum swinging way too far to the left, especially with female rights and female sensibilities. This gynocentric Leviathan we call the state is way out of balance. I think that's like when you see people like Richard Reeves and others trying to push the pendulum back the other way. But this article is named Why Children Need Nurturing Fathers. It's out of the Wall Street Journal. Until a few decades ago, American parents generally fell into specific gender roles, with fathers as providers and mothers as nurturers. Notice the gender roles that we don't teach anymore. So many more mothers are also providers today. Research suggests that fathers still lag behind as responsive caregivers. A soon-to-be published survey of more than 1,600 teenagers by the Harvard Educational School's Making Caring Common project found that almost twice as many 14 to 18-year-old boys and girls feel comfortable opening up to their mothers, 72%, as to their fathers, 39%, about anxiety, depression, or other mental health challenges. The gap suggests that fathers can be much more involved at home, offering the kind of emotional support that many children today so urgently need. I know that's not going to work because mothers and fathers give different kinds of emotional support. And I've always said that mothers make you feel better. They're nurturers, they're emotional nurturers. Fathers are physical nurturers. Fathers make you better. They prepare you for the world. You're not going to be able to shoehorn fathers, especially men, into that same kind of touchy-feely nurturing. They're not. It's not going to work. No matter how much you push, because the same patterns still persist. Same patterns still persist. Intimacy between a parent and child acts as a protective buffer against the day-to-day challenges of life. Sociologists have found that warm, caring dads produce what they call the good father effect. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Family Psychology examined the at-home emotional support received by 388 adolescents over several years, measuring levels of parental intimacy by asking questions about how often they went to their mother or father for advice and how much they shared feelings and secrets with them. Men are not women. Stop trying to make men women. The researchers found that closeness with fathers was associated with fewer weight concerns, high self-esteem, and fewer depression symptoms for both boys and girls. Close relationships with mothers provided positive benefits, but for a narrower range of ages than fathers. Very true. The older you get, the more you need your father. In the context of two-parent families, the protective effects of father-youth intimacy may be more apparent than those of mother-youth intimacy. Different roles, the researchers wrote. Since mothers tend to be engaged in such conversations more than fathers, emotional closeness with the fathers may be more salient and have more impact, says lead research Dr. Anna Hofgraf at the University of Minnesota. A literature review just published in January in the Journal of Infant and Child Development looked at nearly 46 studies on father-child relationships and highlighted the role that dads play in building a child's skills in regulating emotions. Fathers who were involved in caregiving and play and who reacted with warmth and greater sensitivity to a child who expressed emotions were significantly more likely to have children with better emotional balance from infancy to adolescence. Those skills in children are linked, in turn, with higher levels of social competence, peer relationships, academic achievement, and resilience, while poor emotional regulation skills are linked with anxiety, depression, and behavioral problems. Sociologists have found that warm, caring dads produce a good father effect. Boys can be especially affected by whether fathers are a part of the emotional equation. Our culture often tells men that softer emotions are weak, so fathers may have to give sons explicit permission to feel, says Mark Brackett, director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. Jesus Christ, emotional intelligence. Because many men didn't grow up with an emotionally warm male role model. If you're black, you probably didn't grow up with the emotionally warm female role model, but that's a story for a different day. They may lack confidence in their own abilities to be sensitive caregivers, which can hold them back. When women take on the role of being the sole emotional caregiver, the only one who can comfort a child, the one who talks about emotions, it further entrenches the idea that the expression of vulnerable feelings belongs in the domain of women, says Lisa D'Amour, author of The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, Raising Connected, Capable, and Compassionate Adolescents. She adds, it's not enough to encourage our sons to share their inner worlds. They're not women. The men they look up to and respect need to show them how it's done. A father's lack of confidence can set off a vicious cycle. Mothers sometimes respond by engaging in what researchers call gatekeeping behavior. Very true. Actions that can obstruct the other parent's relationship with the child. Also very true. Maternal gatekeeping can occur in loving, otherwise supportive marriages. In 2015 study published in the journal Parenting, Sarah Shope Sullivan, a professor of psychology at Ohio State University, found that mothers are more likely to close the gate to fathers. Very true. When the women are feeling anxious and depressed or hold excessively high standards for parenting, or when fathers lack confidence. In these cases, mothers get frustrated when they feel parenting tasks aren't done to their standards. Very true. Listen to this. They may then take care of the tasks themselves or even redo them after a father has completed them. Very true. In this way, gatekeeping can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more that fathers believe that they're incapable of caregiving, the more likely mothers are to take control, limiting paternal involvement and adding to the psychological load that falls on women. In other words, it's women that don't want to let the father or the men learn, okay? If you're young, you don't have kids, okay? You have never had kids before. You got to learn on the fly just like everybody else. You got to make mistakes like everybody else. And and women want to try to make fathers or men give emotional care the way they would. And men are not women. But it's not saying that in this piece, at least so far. Social factors like paid leave for mothers or lack of it for fathers conspire to influence gatekeeping behaviors, placing mothers in the role of primary caregiver and placing fathers in the secondary position as helper. And that's what we as a society need to break, says Shope Sullivan. Parents need to be on the lookout for and guard against division of parenting labor that unwittingly reinforces problematic patterns. Matt Schneider, a father of two and co-founder of a national support group for fathers called City Dads Group, says fathers need to push back against the myth that men are less capable of being sensitive than their female counterparts. Fathers don't need to accept the proposition that they are inherently less nurturing, says Mr. Schneider. Learning how to be a warm, emotionally attentive parent, he says, simply involves on-the-job training and staying active and engaged until you start getting good at it. That's what I was just saying. During the early days of the COVID pandemic, when families were mostly home together, more fathers experienced strong intimacy with their children. A couple of months into the lockdowns, Making Caring Common surveyed 1,300 parents and found that 70% of fathers, cutting across race and class, reported feeling closer to their children just by being there. Of course, you're going to feel close to them. More than half reported that their children were sharing more about their emotions. In a follow-up survey published in June 2020, looking at why dads felt closer despite the challenges, one father said it's because we seem to be communicating more often and on a deeper level just by being there. With the world moving on from the pandemic, it now takes more deliberate effort to carve out time in the day for such conversations. One place where fathers can take the lead in talking about feelings is at the dinner table. by opening up about the best and worst parts of their day. They can show that grown men also experience emotions such as joy, sadness, and frustration. It's very true. Fathers can also strive to become what Yale's Dr. Brackett calls an emotional scientist, someone who shows curiosity about their children's feelings and teaches them how to put those feelings into words instead of listening in order to solve a problem. A common instinct among men, this type of active listening requires empathy. The focus isn't on offering advice, but on getting a child open up by asking encouraging questions. What do you need right now? What can I do to help? That's also solving a problem. That's also female language. And listening to their answers to best protect their children's mental health, particularly our sons, says Dr. Dingmore. We wanted them to understand that being strong isn't about being invulnerable. And what they're missing is, probably what's going to have to come out is that a man's emotional labor doesn't show up the same way a woman's does. And I think they're starting to get that, even though it didn't say it expressly or specifically that way. I don't think they're telling men to be women, because men can't be women. And I think what they're trying to say in a kind of PC way, they need women to back off and let men be men. And men talk to their children the way that men need to talk to their children, and stop trying to gatekeep or stop trying to undo something that the man has already done. And just like they have to, the men are going to learn on the fly. Women are not perfect as far as taking care of children. I got 2 daughters. I can tell you, in hell that they're perfect. They got to learn on the fly just like everybody else, just like I did, with my children. And even their mother had to learn about it with my children. Got to learn it on the fly. And as you experience it, you actually get better at it. There's some things that my ex, she could do better than me as far as listening to the kids and feel nurturing. And there's some things that, trust and believe, she handed over to me because she couldn't handle it. And solving problems is part of emotional labor. Okay, not just making you feel better. Okay, men can do that in certain circumstances. Men can show emotion. That's what you saw in the movie Maverick. That's one thing why they loved Top Gun Maverick, is because they did show emotion. They did show love. They did show caring. They did. But it didn't show up like a female's emotion and emotional labor. It didn't. It never does. Even with my grandsons, okay? My emotional labor doesn't show up the same way that their mothers do or their grandmothers do. It doesn't show up the same way. And I think that the balance is going to have to be that way, because of what they're trying to do is get men to check back in, because we've gone so far feminist and shut men out so much that men don't want to participate. So they're trying to convince men to come back in and participate. And I think what they saw with COVID, because the children were forced to be at home with their fathers, they started to learn how men relate with their children as far as emotional labor. They're starting to learn that. I think COVID was a good thing. COVID gave a pause. COVID changed a lot of beliefs that we had, that we developed over the past 50 years. And some of them were right, but a lot of them were actually wrong. And I think COVID may have been a gift, or COVID may have been a gift and a curse. But I think it's been a gift because it caused the whole world to pause and re-examine themselves and find out what's really important. But we'll see going forward, because the effects of the COVID pause isn't over yet. We still got to work through it, financially, emotionally, physically, all that kind of stuff. We still got to work through that stuff. But I think coming out on the other side, if we make it, is going to be positive. Anyhow, that's all I got for this one. It's BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.